Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Simmons, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to a webinar hosted by Wavicle Data Solutions, titled The Disruption of AI, Challenges and Preparation for the Future. I'll introduce our esteemed guests in just a moment, but to help set the table for what you're about to hear. If you're tuning into this, you're probably already aware, of course, that AI is rapidly transforming industries, as well as lives, professionally, personally. But the path forward in terms of AI is not exactly clear, nor without its challenges. Today, we're going to bring together Phil LeBrun, enterprise strategist at Amazon Web Services and former CIO, who is a leading expert in cloud and AI technology, and Mary Purk, an AI and analytics advisor and co-founder of AI at the Wharton School. As I mentioned, my name is Andrew Simmons. I'll be moderating today's discussion. I lead the retail and CPG practice at Wavicle Data Solutions that focuses on data, analytics, and AI as part of our interdisciplinary practice. Today's discussion is going to focus on the disruptive power of AI, challenges organizations are likely to face therein, and hopefully practical strategies for preparing to embrace and capitalize on AI innovations of today and tomorrow. Whether it's ranging from technical complexities to ensuring ethical deployment, hopefully today's conversation will offer all listeners actionable insights for you guys to take to your organizations looking to participate in an AI-driven world. Our first topic today is AI disruption and what it means for businesses. As Phil, you and Mary know, AI has been emerging as a powerful force in the business landscape for at least the last decade, if not more. But in the past few years, it's become a business imperative across industries. As experts with AI experience across a broad swath of industries, Phil, I'll start with you. How do you see AI disrupting the current business landscape? And how does that disruption impact the way organizations operate?
It's a really interesting question, given I think disruption happens because often we're asleep at the wheel. We don't see what's right in front of us. And there's this phenomenon called Amara's law, which says we overestimate technology in the short term and underestimate in the long term. So you go through this cycle we see with generative AI, and we've seen throughout history where I think a lot of people have done proof of concepts. And some have been disappointed. It hasn't fundamentally revolutionized their business. But those who've kept at it are starting to see some really interesting results. What I hear from a lot of organizations is their focus initially was on efficiency. How do I take more calls in my call center? How do I maximize my developers' time? How do I generate more lines of code? How do I do sales more efficiently? And your efficiency is great, but if you're saving time and money, you ultimately have to redirect it to something which, I think typically we call disruption, but in reality is about driving your business. So we're starting to see shoots of that. So people rethinking, for instance, how travel's done. You go onto a travel website today, and often there's lots of slider bars, check boxes. It's the most unnatural experience to book a holiday. And all you really want to do is to say, my name's Phil, I'm married, my wife likes art, I like a beach holiday. Literally describe what you want. And from that, the heavy lifting's done by the travel company. And this isn't even just about the commercial sector. I think we see the same in public sector too. It's really interesting working with organizations like Swindon Borough Council. They're using generative AI to actually make a plethora of government regulations and benefits accessible to folks with learning disabilities by taking what is very complex information and distilling it down in a way that's digestible. NatWest are doing something similar to help protect wealth, for instance. So I think where AI plays a particularly powerful role here is to get rid of some of the undifferentiated heavy lifting and then hide the complexity of an organization's operation from a customer. To make it much easier to do business with them. And, at Amazon, we've been using machine learning for 25 years now to do exactly that. Not to replace humans, but to replace those things which machines are much more capable of doing to free up humans to do the things we're uniquely qualified to do.
That really resonates with me, Phil. And just touching on something that you said there, I think when I talk to leaders today, a very common phrase is, what am I doing with AI? As you indicate, AI is not a monolith. It offers a variety of benefits. I think One thing that I'd be interested in your thoughts are is how leaders can think about some of the incremental offloading operational balances while also thinking about some of those big ticket innovation and disruptive things. How do you see leaders kind of doing both walking and chewing gum at the same time?
I think it's actually a virtuous cycle. So the less time you spend having to manage your internal operation and bureaucracy and paperwork and meetings and PowerPoints, the more time and energy you can free up to focus on those areas of innovation. Yeah, I think we talk about disruption as if it has to be a big overnight thing, and we know that's not how it works. The reality is this is about falling in love with a problem the customer has, and then allowing people to experiment their way there. Yeah, my advice is quite simple. Look inside your operation. We'll calculate what we'd call your bureaucratic mass index, the amount of money that is spent on things we've always done, but no one can actually tell you why we've always done it. The amount of time spent waiting for decisions 6 levels above you when you could have taken it quite competently and faster yourself. So the walking and chewing gum is an interesting metaphor, but I much prefer this idea of shifting your focus from one area, the internal machinations of your business, to shifting your focus to what really matters, which is your customers, citizens, patients, or students.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And Mary, just touching on some things that Phil indicated, obviously the historical parallels to, navigating an innovation cycle with either technology or process improvements, we've seen, those cycles move before. From your vantage point, Mary, in what ways has AI has an echo to history, particularly in the history of business, and in what ways do you think that it is new and forging new ground?
Well, I think actually Phil talked about, the history in some way. And sometimes companies approach technology as like, okay, here's here's a new way in which we're going to do business. We have to do it because it's, our competitors are doing it. There's a lot of following, like what is everyone doing in our industry? What are the consultants telling us? What are technologists telling us? Okay, we got to move everything to the cloud. So we're all doing that. So there's a lot of following, which is fine if you're a fast follower. And I think that is occurring right now, but at a much faster pace because of trial. So people or companies, entities can do that, but they will have big voids potentially within their industries, and potentially those companies might not necessarily exist in a couple of years if they do it at that same pace, because this technology is exponential is not even good enough of a word or something to describe this technology. It's exponential for companies. It's transformative. In the truest form, it's transformative. And two key points I would say that's different are it's accessible. The accessibility that this technology is allowing for all employees, all departments to participate in that transformation is key. So accessibility, and everyone doesn't need to, for the first time, everyone doesn't need to be a data scientist. You don't need to know how to code. You need to know logic. You need to be curious. You need to be disciplined and focused on the right questions, something that Phil was basically saying, falling in love with the problem. I've been to a lot of these different conferences, and finally, even the technologists that are selling the goods are finally saying what we in academics or we in leadership have been saying. You need to focus on the question. What are we trying to solve? To Phil's point, are you pushing more papers? The concept, Asana, what does Asana do? Asana organizes everything. I'm like, what does Salesforce do? It organizes everything for you. There's this organization upon organization upon organization. And that's good because maybe we were disorganized and we weren't efficient enough. And you can focus on the efficiencies, like Phil mentioned, but he also mentioned in a big way, which I really believe where companies are going to have to be, is on the innovation part. So get your efficiencies correct. Yes, use this technology to be more efficient, and and have better security and have a better relationship with your customers. But if you're not using this to innovate, you might not be around. You might not be around in the next 3 to 5, 7 years, or it could be really quick. So that's what I think is significant. And the last thing I'll say, part of this is that's all about the innovation and efficiency. What's different this time is that if leadership doesn't lean in and understand that they have to be leaders, not only of like, where are we going and the vision, like broad vision, that they have to be able to communicate to their employees the trust of how they're going to manage their journeys within the company with this technology, and clearly stating, okay, we're all adults here and your job might change, but I'm going to give you some options, and you're going to have to actually learn new skills, and you're probably going to have to keep learning new skills. And that's our culture. And if you want that culture, I'll support you, and I'm going to give you the tools for that. And I'm going to lean in, and I'm going to be smart about AI too. I'm not just going to rely on my chiefs. I'm going to do it too. And so it's lead by example. So that was a lot, but that, to me, those are the differences. Yes, there'll be some things that are similar, but these two things are going to be different.
And Mary, and then Phil, feel free to add on anything you'd like. When you're talking to leaders who are about to embark on this journey, obviously, as you indicated, there's a large cultural piece to it, preparing your people, looking at your organization. What would your advice be to leaders when you mentioned the kind of like the trend, over the last call 25 years for organization that's deeply embedded in some organizations, striving for organization, where AI might challenge the deep-seated need for some of those things, whether it's unstructured data, or we need to be less rigorous with knowledge management because generative AI can provide some answers across knowledge management bases, et cetera. How are you kind of talking to leaders about how to take their teams culturally and maybe even emotionally through this disruptive journey?
I think it's good that you mentioned emotionally and recognizing that because because they're scared. Some people are scared, some people are excited. So I think that's good that you recognize that. In terms of how to take them through the journey, the leader or leadership team, including, I would say, also the board. They have to connect with that board. And if that board needs to be really well connected as well to where AI is going to take their company. It's not going to take it all over, but just where does it, play in? Again, is first you have to say, where are we going to use these tools to solve our problems or to innovate? So it's like, you hear this all the time. Is it the efficiency? Is it the innovation? And so you have to have that vision before you go and talk to the customers. And if you're a leader and you're not exactly sure, then you have to be vulnerable and you need to talk to your team. You need to talk to your board. You need to understand, do I need outside help or not to guide us and get this mission where we're going? And then say, how will this technology help us? And then look outside in your competition. How is this technology helping our competitors? How are we going to differentiate? And as Phil mentioned, transform. And at that point, then I think you can go to your employees and say, this is our roadmap. This is where we're going. And this is how we're going to get there. I don't have it all laid out exactly, but if you're a part of this vision, then you need to contribute. And I always say to leaders, they need to say to their employees, at this point in time, I advise you not to wait to be asked to do something with this technology and participate, but ask to participate.
Makes total sense.
And that message has double meaning. It is basically saying to these to their teams, all of us can contribute, and I want you to be part of this. And it's not going to be this, top-down approach. And to me, that will foster just the innovation part that, and also provide permission for these employees to realize we can all be part and use AI. It's not just going to be in IT, and they're going to send down all these different acronyms that I have to learn and all these new systems. But, just I think if that's what that culture of that leader wants to do, I think you have to get the vision first, and then you can tell your employees, this is how we're going to manage through this, and somewhat, if they would like to, democratize how that innovation is going to occur.
I would, I 100% agree, Mary. I'd almost take one step back and say, even before you start the conversation about how we're going to use generative AI, is just like, what business are we in? When we talk about business disruption and serving our customers better, what does that even mean? Agnostic of the technology. And I'm always surprised working with boards and senior level leadership teams, how little time they spend together talking about what really, really makes us special and getting that sort of foundation right, so then they can look at how to apply the technology. The other thing I find curious too is, as leaders, we often talk about what we want our employees to do. I think it starts, and you implied this, Mary, it starts with us as leaders. Have we learnt what AI and ML and deep learning and generative AI is? Have we learnt, and are we role modeling how to use data to make decisions? Because the reality is, over a third of employees today are using generative AI to help with their job, whether it's sanctioned or not. Because, as you rightly pointed out, this is a bit like a calculator. Everyone has access to it. In fact, it's even easier to get hold of generative AI than it was to go and buy a calculator back in the day. So people want to use this. It's creating that environment, as you talk about. But I think it's so essential that leaders role model both the learning behavior as well as being specific about what does great look like when they start to apply technology or start to solve real problems for their organization.
And see what he said, like right there, what does great look like? And that's why leadership is so important at this point in time. And they are so lucky. Like for me, the success of what we do, not only, within the United States, but in the world with this technology, is the leaders. And I'm not just talking about the CEOs, I'm talking about that whole C-suite and board members. In my opinion, they all have a responsibility to not only to their business, but to their employees, to society. I mean, they are so lucky. We are so lucky, Phil, myself, you, that we're in this position of influence that we can't, but you have to be the best coaches at this point in time. And you can be really satisfied with what you're going to be doing with it, but you can change people's lives, not only your employees, but within society. And I think it's really important that board members and such really evaluate that team that they have in place at these companies, because leadership is just so important where we go with it. And there's a moment in time. This is like, I agree. It's a longer term, how we're going to be adapting to it. You made a really good analogy there at the beginning, Phil. But in terms of leadership and what people do with it, like these next 18 months to 24 months are really key for leaders. I mean, it was key for all the technologists, and they still have all the, a lot of the, our ears, I forget how you say it, but they just have a lot of the airwaves. But right now it's really leaders in what they do with it.
Yeah, it does feel like that for sure. So as we talk a little bit about some of the challenges to harnessing some of that power, maybe I'll start here, Phil, with you. Something kind of really practically I hear from the C-suite, in my practice is, and perhaps it's a legacy of maybe other technology innovation in the last 25 years, is, I think I'm actually going to let the market figure this out a little bit more. I want to be maybe a fast follower, maybe even a slower follower. I'm going to kind of keep my powder dry a little bit. What would your message be to leaders who are kind of taking that stance in terms of, what should they be doing? Is that the right mental model to have and to think about here, as Mary indicates, this kind of, 18 to 24 month imperative inflection point?
Quite simple. Start being a leader. A leader isn't a title, it's what you do. And how much longer do we have to wait to capitalize on what we have at our fingertips? 20 years ago, people were talking about, well, let's wait to see what happens with the cloud. 15 years ago, people were talking about, let's wait and see what happens with data. Now, it's how much longer are we going to wait? We know there's certain imperatives around getting ready for the future. I'm not a great believer in using crystal balls. The only thing that happens when you play with crystal balls is you cut your hands on broken glass. But I think one fair prediction is whatever you want to do in the future, whether it's generative AI, ML, insights into your business, quantum, or whatever the future holds, you're going to need a solid foundation for data, and you're going to have to be able to use that data. So why would you not take that no regrets decision today to make sure you got the foundation in place? And yes, there's a technology piece to that, making sure that you have data in a single place, and it's secure and accessible. Those are solved problems. There's organizations out there who've been doing that for 20, 30 years now. So I don't know why we would wait to go resolve that in a organization today. But the bigger part we see is actually more on the culture, leadership, organization, and skill set. So we know quantifiably the majority of data issues are things like leadership behavior. The leader who stands there and says, we're going to be a data-enabled organization. But I've been here 20 years, so I know what the answer is. So immediately sort of dissolving that desire for employees to go off and actually use data, or data being trapped in silos because folks believe that's their power base. Or more an obvious one is data literacy. We train people, or we are brought up as leaders being versant in descriptive analytics. How many tires or Big Macs did I sell last Wednesday? That doesn't mean you can use predictive or prescriptive analytics. How many tires am I going to sell next Wednesday, and what can I do about it? So raising the bar in terms of data literacy across the entire organization, and then also creating a culture where people can take that data, not just get insights because they're mildly interesting, but actually drive those insights into action. So pushing the data to the front line as much as possible. So there's many other things that can be done, but creating a culture where people want to use the data, not just to answer questions, but even to find questions that they hadn't even thought about asking previously.
Yep. Mary, Phil indicated a couple of things I'd love to get both of your responses to as a follow-up, but I'll start here. The imperative and the no regrets for a data foundation to build and scale AI from in the future. When you think about the challenges from your vantage point for organizations and, deploying and building out that data foundation, what are you guys seeing out there?
Well, the good news is that fortunately, everyone realizes how important data is, and there is this connection between data and models, and garbage in, garbage out. So there's that basis of data literacy. But to Phil's point, he's like, we need to raise the bar and explain to people, it's just, those are table stakes now. We need to know. As one person said the other day at one of these talks, they said, as Wayne Gretzky said, you skate to where, actually it was Reid Hoffman on an HBR IdeaCast podcast. He's like, Wayne Gretzky skates to where the hockey is going to be, not where it is. And that's how I would even take data literacy. You need to educate your teams to where you need them to be, not where they are. And that's how you can get into that predictive and prescriptive analytics. I mean, frankly, we should change those names if we can, make them a little more user-friendly. But, that essentially is what it is. And that is within the culture. And I think the other thing I really appreciated what Phil said was, you want to encourage your teams, your employees to use the data. So that is, that's where I think this generative AI comes in, because it's a phenomenon of how many people, it was downloaded in like 1 million, downloads, or 5 million downloads in the first, week, then 100 million.
TikTok run for its money.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was just like, it's crazy good. So leaders should, take that upon themselves, say, oh my God, all right, we have all this excitement. Now let's really add in the data piece of it, because these models only work so well as the data. Now we have, the LLMs that we might be bringing into our enterprise, but then, we have all our proprietary data. And why is that so important? And, like Phil said, well, we could really figure out if we can sell, more Big Macs on the south side of Chicago on a Wednesday morning because of XXX. So why aren't we doing that? So it's like they can really say, okay, I can solve these questions now because it's not so hard to get the data, but I need to like double check, make sure that data is good. And that's why I'm important, the human in the loop. loop. And again, so it's all these different, it's part of that, the tripod of the model, the data, and the people to create, good decisions to go out there. So that's what, and I love data. I mean, we're so lucky we have so much with us that we can now finally do something with it, and it's not going to be cumbersome. Thanks to, companies like AWS and Wavicle, we should be able to use data really easily, and now we have our models. So work should be really a lot of fun.
I just want to pick up on something you said, Mary, because it really struck a chord, which is a lot of leadership's role now is setting the right problems to solve and then letting people get on with it. That's what makes work fun. This idea that the leaders determine exactly what needs to be done because they have all the knowledge, that worked really, really well in the 19th century. Now, the leaders coming up with those big, hairy problems and giving those to teams who have the data to really look at what hypotheses do I need to come up with, what experiments I need to run. That makes work fun and is massively impactful in terms of the buy-in from your own employees.
But you know what else that means? That's where leadership, I think, has to be changed. Like people are going to be looking for different types of leaders. You got to have that ego in check. You have to be vulnerable. And you have to be able to know that you're going to win as a team and that you're willing to give that authentic congratulations to individuals versus keeping it with it. I mean, that to me is also going to be really critical within leadership.
But how hard can that be?
Phil, I think one other thing that Mary said that resonated with me that I'd like to get you to comment on is it might just be me, but when it comes to descriptive reporting and that has been useful and very important in the last 25 years, whether you're reporting to the street or trying to figure out to the dollar someone's sales commission, as an example, I think some of the implicit, this is Andrew's opinion, but I think some of the implicit anxiety that we've injected into organizations as data professionals is you got to be scared of data. It's got to be right. It's got to go through dev, QA, pre-prod, pre-prod 2, pre-prod 3, get release, then QA before anybody can use it. Part of AI is, I would say, Mary, as you indicated, it's so exciting getting into culture that is data friendly and wants to use data. So, Phil, I'd be interested, in your thoughts about if you agree, how we can kind of decrease the anxiety and increase the discovery in organizations when it comes to using their data.
I think I must have turned into a geek over the past few years because I love playing around with data. It's amazing what you can find if you go into it with an open mind. So a couple of things spring to mind. I think the era of big data should have taught us something, which is data quality is really important. Certain data, you want the quality to be, especially when it comes to threats to life and the such like, you want it to be accurate. For much of what we do, what we're looking for is big trends. Machine learning is ideal for that. It's less about the individual data points. It's more about what can you observe in the trends. I see a lot of individuals who get that start to apply the creative side of their mind. What questions should I be asking rather than what answer am I seeking? And then you're absolutely right. Make data fun to use. We talk about building data into the workflow of the average employee. So rather than make them go down a particular route, you have to use this tool and you have to get this person's permission and this person's sign off. I know it's an overused phrase, but democratize access to data as much as you can. I think Stanley McChrystal in Team of Teams talked about shared data until it's nearly illegal. So take that approach of giving as much data as possible, but then give people the tools they are comfortable with. That could be QuickSight, it could be Power BI, it could be SAS, R, Python. We did that at McDonald's, and it was really interesting because if you make it easy for people to use data because they're using tools familiar to them, then they're more inclined to use it. It's obvious, isn't it? But it's sort of basic change management. How do you enable users to get to the data, as opposed to what do you want those users to be doing to jump through the hoops you've put in the way of them getting to the data?
Makes total sense.
Can I just comment on
of course.
What Phil said that is so key, and that is, he just said it. It's basic change management. And that's what's great about what's happening with AI, generative AI, and the fact a lot of us already have our data. Thank God, for that we now have the clouds. The data is there for the most part. If it isn't, sorry, you're really behind. But for the most part, people all have these clouds and they have these security systems and everything. So it's it's the change management that is, I mean, yes, you're going to have to be very secure about your models if they're going to be, enterprise, on-prem, all these other things. You have to make, but you have people that make those decisions. But it's basic change management. It's going to be, change is hard, but it's not like you need to get a PhD in mechanics or physical, physics or whatever. A lot of people can make this happen and be transformative in their company. That's what I think is really going to be exciting to see.
Absolutely. And Mary, one quick follow-up question, just put a button on this particular subject. So when you think about data foundations, many organizations, to both of your points, have been in that space for 25, 30 years and have programs to, improve data quality and access through data governance, et cetera. What role do you see those traditional data governance programs having in, both enabling a quality data on a data foundation, but also perhaps growing into the AI governance space?
Well, first, I think first and foremost that is one term that is not that companies need to be better, that they need to educate themselves about and educate their employees and their board, all the board members. It's not just one committee around governance, and then it permeates across all the different departments. I really admire. I'm sure this is across many companies, but I have specifically seen, Walmart put out like their governance that they're doing across all their different functions. And they have it's a responsible AI governance that they are having all employees sign. And part of it is it touches upon all the different things about security of the data and things like that, but it also talks about what they're going to be doing for the customer, protecting the customer's data and such. So that to me is an action that they decided to educate their whole ecosystem about what they're going to do with governance. So it can take different shapes and forms based on your industry, and based on your employees and your customers, but it needs to be much broader, and it's almost like a literacy around governance, and it's very, very closely inextricably tied to data, which is the lifeblood of almost all companies at this point. So that's how I see governance. Now, can they do different things? Yeah, you can have an AI committee, which can dictate how you prioritize your use cases. There's a wide variety of things that AI governance can be part of. I think you just have to decide for your company how you already have some governance structure set up. So how can you expand it so that it's not just within like maybe the audit function or the CIO, but it permeates across. It's like what people know at HR. Everyone's affected by HR, so it's a similar thing with governance. That's what I would say about that.
I think that's a terrific example. Federated HR, same as governance. Phil, I think we've talked a lot about so far the people, the cultural, the process side of it. Be interested in any comments you have, based on Mary's last statement. But, turning our eye a little bit towards the technology side of it, the technology stack. One high-level question that I often hear is, how ready is my technology stack for this advent of AI? I'm buckled up. Let's go. Can you assess me? Can you make recommendations, etc.? What are your thoughts on AI technology readiness for an organization?
The metaphor analogy I use with organizations is electricity is pretty important to most organizations, but you don't find most organizations building their own power stations. And the reason I say that is, we've got the cloud now, and the cloud isn't just someone else's data center. It's a toolkit of hundreds of services that enable you to experiment cost effectively and quickly across your organization. So to me, number one is, have you got particularly your customer facing, citizen facing workloads in the cloud to enable you to have that agility to experiment? The same with data. These days of buying a data center and then lots of expensive licenses, and then I don't care what your problem is, the answer is this license we bought 5 years ago. That's ridiculous. We're hamstringing employees. And in fact, data tells us that if employees feel like they can't progress in their job. They can't actually solve problems. Organizations are losing the very people they need, their top talent, the most creative folks, the folks with data science backgrounds or deep insights into their business. They're the ones leaving first. So you get into the technology stack, which gives you the most flexibility. Sort your data out. I think we've hammered on that. There's no reason not to have your data in a secure location accessible to everyone. Yes, we can talk about data lakes, data meshes, how you go about that, but fundamentally, the goal, the outcome needs to be ubiquitous data access within an organization, and then start modernizing how you actually treat technology. And some of that could be taking some of your legacy technology, those mainframes that have been around for years, which are the boat anchors of many industries. And there's 3 ways of modernizing a mainframe. You rewrite it, which is always a lot of work. You strangle it, take bits off, and that's more practical. Or unfortunately, the most prevalent pattern is to leave it to the next leader. Let's not be that leader who leaves it to the next leader. Let's start on some of those really hard problems, modernizing some of those core systems that then give you the agility to experiment and scale good ideas quickly with your customers.
Thanks, Phil. Mary, anything to add before we move into some closing thoughts?
I guess I would like to make a statement in that, we've said, oh, this part should be easy. It's change management, it's leadership, but the technology piece that Phil's talking about, that the data needs to be accessible and everything is so important, that there is accessibility. But it is a big, it's a tall order to really understand like where your data is and within these models. And then if you have these APIs where the data is going from one model to another area and it might be outside the organization.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's really, so it will be very important for the organization, for you, the organization, to understand and challenge AWS, challenge Microsoft, challenge OpenAI. Where does this data go? Exactly. And if I have APIs, is it exposed to other risks? Like, know your risks. So accessibility is super key. And I agree with that, but you need to know the risks of where the data is going, how it's connected through your different APIs. Like Phil said, there's 100 different options that you have within, where it is now within the cloud or these data lakes. But you just need to know when you're connecting with your other vendors, you're the parent in the room and you're asking like, tell me where it goes, because many of these people are going to say, it's okay. It's like, it's all contained. It was trained on data, 6 months ago, and then we'll make an update. And then you have your enterprise stuff and it's staying here and it's super easy. Well, it's not super clean. You need to know and just continue to ask those hard questions. So I would like to make just that statement within the technology aspect of this. That part's not easy.
Thanks, Mary. And then Phil, before we wrap up, we'd love to get your thoughts on what Mary just said.
100%. I think this goes back to, let's start some of that leadership education. What is the cloud? There is this perception that if data's in my own data center, which I manage, it's more secure than the public cloud. It's not. Now, there's certain things you need to do. You, as a customer, have accountability to make sure your data is encrypted and you manage access controls and the such like. But again, I think it starts with some of that education. Same with generative AI. I mean, our approach is quite simple. Bring the foundational model into your secure environment and use your data there. No one but you has access to that. None of your training goes to anyone else. But really being clear about how to do this, why it's different, and what you need to be thinking about as a board and a C-suite team is absolutely critical.
Well said. Well said. Well, as we look to wrap up here, on behalf of our listening audience, I'd really like to thank Phil for your time and Mary for your time and insights. It's been insightful and hopefully impactful for our listeners. Mary, if we could start with you for just one kind of closing thought, and Phil, I'll come around and ask you the same question. We've talked, I'd say, hopefully pretty broadly, but we've dived pretty deep too in the areas of AI disruption, the title of our conversation today. As we're looking to, turn the page into 2025, Mary, any particular kind of near-term trends that you foresee that you'd like leaders and other industry participants to be prepared for?
I think they need to be prepared for more change. It's not going to slow down. And also, two things. I think one, the unstructured data is going to continue to increase, just like hundredfold. So know what unstructured data you potentially have that's going to be valuable to you and how you're going to ingest that. And also, again, this is all related to data. It's how you're going to be communicating not only to your customers, but your employees, not just through text or emails, but it could be voice, it can be video, and it is going to be multi-dimensional. That's going to be occurring, how we're communicating. So know that that is coming. And that's what's going to be out there. And so it's more of a message to companies because that's all going to be out there. And we're going to have agents that are going to be helping us. There's going to be much more of these agents that are going to be helping us. And that's going to be really, really helpful. But plan for that because it's going to be multimodal. It's going to be a lot of unstructured data, which we're not super sure exactly how to capture efficiently, but know that that's coming. And then how you're going to use that to be a transformative company that survives out in the wild.
Exciting. Thanks, Mary. Phil?
I agree with everything Mary said. We're at the start of the transformation, not the end. So yeah, more change to come, but it's exciting. We're going to do things we can't even imagine at the moment. But one of you made the points earlier on about all boats should rise. I mean, there's a societal implication here that everyone can benefit from this. I'll pick up on one aspect of that, which is, recently we did a survey across Europe. We know there's a 3.2 trillion euro opportunity in Europe alone. And the same is true for the US, Asia Pacific, and the such like. From digital technology, ML, AI, generative AI, the biggest challenge by far that outstripped everything, including regulatory concerns and the such like, is skill sets. We have to invest in people. Those organizations that understand that their people are going to stay if they feel invested in, if they can experiment, if they can pick up the skills, they're the ones that are going to do some exceptional things. So I think we need to start thinking about our organizations as places of learning, not send someone on a training course for a week when there's time, but actually to build that learning into how people actually do their job day to day, because that's going to give them the tools to do some exceptional, unimaginable things for those organizations.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil.
Can I just double down on that? I
Yeah,
agree with that, but I also think that is part of the technologists. If for companies to ask the technologists that's what they need. They don't need any more shiny new models. They need help with the skill sets and improving those skill sets. So it's like it's a conversation between both the companies and the technologists providing some of that content that's necessary to invest in those skill sets.
Absolutely. Well, for everyone that's tuning in, I hope you find yourself as excited and grateful as I am to be sitting here with this outlook in the world of AI disruption. Phil and Mary, thank you so much for your insights to help us navigate and take advantage of that opportunity. Thank you both very much for your time and for your insights, and we'll talk to you all very soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.